Hello and welcome. Tonight, we'll be exploring one of the most remarkable stories ever told. Not the story of a single animal, a single forest, or even a single species, but the story of life itself. The story of a living planet. If you could travel far beyond the clouds, beyond the moon, and continue outward into the darkness of space, Earth would slowly shrink into a small blue sphere, floating against a vast black background. From that distance, there would be no visible cities, no roads, no borders, and no signs of human activity. There would simply be a pale world wrapped in swirling clouds, with deep blue oceans and scattered patches of green and brown. It would look peaceful, quiet, almost delicate. And in many ways, it is. The atmosphere that protects every living thing is surprisingly thin. If Earth were the size of an apple, the breathable layer of air surrounding it would be thinner than the apple's skin. Beneath that fragile blanket of air exists an astonishing variety of life. Tiny bacteria hidden beneath rocks, forests stretching across continents, whales traveling through oceans, eagles soaring on warm currents of air. Millions upon millions of species, each carrying its own story. When we look around in everyday life, it is easy to take this abundance for granted. Trees line streets. Birds sing in the morning. Grass grows between cracks in sidewalks. Nature can seem ordinary because it is always around us. But the deeper we look, the stranger and more extraordinary it becomes. Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago. In its earliest days, it was nothing like the world we know now. The surface was hot and violent. Volcanoes erupted across vast landscapes. Asteroids collided with the young planet. There were no forests, no oceans filled with fish, no flowers opening to the sunlight. If you had somehow visited Earth during those distant ages, you would never have guessed that one day this turbulent world would become home to redwood forests, coral reefs, hummingbirds, butterflies, elephants, and human beings wondering about their place in the universe. And yet, slowly, almost patiently, the planet changed. The surface cooled, water gathered, clouds formed, rain fell. Over immense stretches of time, oceans appeared. Those oceans would become the cradle of everything that followed. Scientists still investigate exactly how life first emerged, but what is clear is that at some point on this young world, chemistry became biology. Matter began organizing itself in new ways. Tiny living systems appeared. From those humble beginnings came every living thing that has ever existed. Every whale, every oak tree, every dragonfly, every human, all connected to those ancient beginnings. The fact that life emerged at all is remarkable, but in some ways, an even greater wonder is that life continued. For billions of years, Earth has experienced enormous changes. Continents drifted across the planet's surface. Oceans opened and closed. Mountains rose and eroded away. Ice ages came and went. Entire groups of organisms appeared, flourished, and disappeared. Yet through all of this change, life endured. It adapted. It experimented. It found new ways to survive. Imagine a candle flame that remains lit through storms, floods, and endless seasons. It may flicker. It may shrink. Sometimes it may seem close to disappearing altogether, but somehow it continues burning. Life on Earth has done something similar for billions of years. Part of this success comes from the unusual qualities of our planet. Earth orbits at a distance from the Sun that allows liquid water to exist across much of its surface. Not permanently frozen, not permanently boiling. Water can flow as rivers, gather as lakes, and fill vast oceans. A magnetic field surrounds the planet, helping shield life from harmful particles arriving from space. The atmosphere helps regulate temperature and provides the gases that living organisms depend upon. The moon gently stabilizes Earth's orientation as it travels through space, helping create a relatively predictable environment over long periods of time. None of these features may seem dramatic when considered individually, but together they create a world where life has been able to persist for an astonishing length of time. Even today, Earth remains a place of endless activity. Ocean currents move heat around the globe. Forests release moisture into the air. Microscopic organisms drift through sunlit waters. Seeds travel on the wind. Fungi spread beneath the soil. Animals migrate across continents and oceans. Every moment, countless living processes unfold simultaneously. Most of them happen quietly, a root slowly extending deeper into the ground, a coral polyp building a tiny piece of reef, a bird carrying a seed to a new location, a bacterium dividing into two, small events, nearly invisible events. Yet together they help shape the living world. One of the most beautiful aspects of Earth is that no organism exists entirely alone. Every living thing is connected to something else. A tree depends on sunlight, soil, water, and countless microscopic partners. A wolf depends on prey. A flower depends on pollinators. Even the air we breathe is linked to organisms living in distant oceans. The story of life is not the story of isolated individuals. It is the story of relationships. And as we continue our journey, that idea that will appear again and again. The deeper we look into nature, the more connections we find. Connections between forests and rainfall, between fungi and trees, between oceans and the oxygen in our lungs, between creatures separated by millions of years of evolution, and perhaps most surprising of all, between ourselves and every other living thing that shares this planet. For now, though, imagine Earth once more from far away, a small blue world turning slowly beneath drifting clouds. A world that has spent billions of years nurturing life in forms both familiar and strange. A world whose greatest wonders are only beginning to reveal themselves. As we continue our journey across the living Earth, it is worth pausing for a moment to consider a surprisingly intimate idea. The oak tree standing quietly in a forest, the whale swimming through the open ocean, the eagle circling high above a mountain valley, and the person listening to these words may seem completely different from one another. And yet, they are family. Not close family, of course. Not in the way brothers and sisters share parents or grandparents. The connection stretches much farther back than that. It reaches beyond recorded history, beyond the rise of civilizations, beyond the age of dinosaurs, and into a past so distant that it becomes difficult to imagine. Every living thing on Earth is related. Somewhere in the deep past, if we travel backward far enough through the branches of life's immense family tree, the paths of all organisms eventually converge. The story begins in the ancient oceans of a very different Earth. At that time, there were no forests swaying in the wind, no birds singing at dawn, no flowers decorating meadows with color. The world belonged to tiny organisms. These early forms of life were microscopic, invisible to human eyes. Yet despite their small size, they would become some of the most important architects in the history of the planet. For hundreds of millions of years, life remained relatively simple. Tiny organisms floated in oceans, absorbed energy, reproduced, and slowly evolved. The pace was unimaginably slow. A human lifetime lasts decades, a civilization may last centuries, but evolution often works across millions of years. Imagine watching a mountain slowly rise from the sea grain by grain. That would still seem fast compared to some of the changes occurring during Earth's earliest chapters. Yet over these immense stretches of time, life continued experimenting. Small changes accumulated, new possibilities emerged, and eventually one of the most significant transformations in Earth's history began. Some ancient microbes developed the ability to capture energy from sunlight. Today we know this process as photosynthesis, but in those distant oceans it was simply a new survival strategy. These tiny organisms used sunlight to help power their lives, and as a byproduct, they released oxygen. At first, this oxygen was not a gift, it was a challenge. Many early organisms had evolved in an environment that contained very little oxygen. For them, the growing presence of oxygen was almost like a pollution event unfolding across the planet. Yet life adapted. New organisms evolved that could use oxygen rather than fear it. Over time, oxygen accumulated in the atmosphere, opening doors to entirely new possibilities. Larger organisms became possible. More complex bodies emerged. Eventually, the conditions that would support animals, plants, and countless future ecosystems began to take shape. It is one of the great ironies of nature. A substance that was once dangerous to many forms of life would later become essential for most of the creatures living on Earth today. The world we know is built upon changes that occurred long before humans existed. And this pattern appears again and again throughout the history of life. The natural world is not fixed. It is constantly changing. Species appear. Species disappear. Environments transform. New opportunities emerge. When we think about biodiversity, we often picture large numbers of species. Tropical birds, butterflies, coral reefs, rainforest mammals. But biodiversity exists on several different levels. One layer exists within species themselves. No two oak trees are exactly identical. No two wolves are completely alike. Even among closely related organisms, small differences exist. These variations provide the raw material that allows populations to adapt over time. Another layer involves the incredible variety of species that share the planet. From microscopic bacteria living deep underground to giant blue whales traveling through the ocean, life has diversified into forms that seem almost endless. And beyond individual species lies an even larger layer of diversity. Entire ecosystems, forests, grasslands, wetlands, deserts, coral reefs, mountain ranges, open oceans. Each ecosystem represents a unique community of organisms interacting with one another and with their environment. Together, they form the living fabric of Earth. What makes this story especially remarkable is that life has not enjoyed an easy journey. The history of our planet includes several major extinction events. At various points, enormous numbers of species disappeared. Some extinctions were triggered by volcanic activity, others by dramatic climate shifts. One of the most famous involved a large asteroid impact that helped bring an end to the age of dinosaurs. If you could have witnessed these events, you might have assumed the story was over. Yet each time, life continued, not unchanged, not untouched, but continued nonetheless. New species emerged, new ecosystems formed, new opportunities appeared in the spaces left behind. A forest after a wildfire may initially seem empty, yet beneath the soil, seeds remain, roots survive, new growth begins. Over time, life returns. Earth has demonstrated this pattern repeatedly on a planetary scale. Again and again, living systems have shown an extraordinary capacity for renewal. This resilience may be one of life's most remarkable qualities, not invincibility, not perfection, but persistence, the willingness to continue adapting in a changing world. And perhaps that is one reason why the story of life feels so captivating. It is not a story of uninterrupted success. It is a story of survival, a story of experimentation, a story of countless living forms responding to challenges over billions of years. The birds outside your window, the grass beneath your feet, the fish swimming through distant oceans, and the microbes living quietly in the soil all represent chapters of this ancient narrative. Each organism carries traces of a history far older than itself. A history stretching back through forests, oceans, ancient atmospheres, and microscopic ancestors. A history that connects every living thing on Earth. And as life diversified across the planet, something extraordinary happened. Evolution began producing solutions so creative, so unexpected, and sometimes so strange that they seem almost impossible. Tiny creatures learned to survive conditions that would destroy most forms of life. Animals evolved abilities that feel almost magical. Some organisms discovered ways to thrive in places that seem completely inhospitable. The deeper we venture into the natural world, the more astonishing these stories become. If there is one lesson woven through the history of life, it is that survival rarely follows a single path. Nature does not solve problems the way an engineer might. There is no master blueprint, no universal design. Instead, life experiments endlessly, generation after generation, across vast stretches of time. Sometimes the solutions are familiar: a thicker coat of fur, a sharper beak, stronger muscles. And sometimes the solutions are so unexpected that they seem almost impossible. One such example is a tiny creature known as the tardigrade. At first glance, a tardigrade does not look particularly impressive. Under a microscope, it appears somewhat like a miniature bear with 8 stubby legs, moving slowly through droplets of water and damp moss. Yet hidden within this tiny body is one of the most remarkable survival abilities ever discovered. When conditions become dangerous, a tardigrade can enter an extreme state of dormancy. Its body loses most of its water. Its metabolism slows almost to a standstill. In this condition, it can survive situations that would quickly destroy most living things. Extreme cold, extreme heat, intense radiation, even the vacuum of space. It is tempting to imagine the tardigrade as a tiny explorer, patiently waiting while the world around it changes. Then, when conditions improve, it simply awakens and continues its journey as though very little has happened. Its story reminds us that survival does not always depend on strength. Sometimes survival depends on patience, and sometimes it depends on flexibility. Far below the ocean surface lives another organism whose strategy feels almost magical. This small creature is often called the immortal jellyfish. The name sounds like something from mythology, yet it refers to a genuine biological phenomenon. Most animals move through life in one direction. They are born, they grow, they mature, and eventually they die. The immortal jellyfish occasionally follows a different path. When stressed or injured, it can reverse part of its development and return to an earlier stage of its life cycle. In a sense, it begins again. Not forever, not perfectly, but enough to make scientists pause in wonder. Imagine a tree that could become a seed once more, or an adult butterfly that could return to being a caterpillar. Nature rarely works this way, yet somehow this tiny jellyfish found a path that bends the usual rules. Its existence is a reminder that evolution often explores possibilities we would never think to imagine. Other creatures have discovered very different ways to endure. Deep beneath parts of eastern Africa, in networks of underground tunnels, lives an animal that many people find unusual at first sight: the naked mole rat. It spends most of its life hidden from the sun, moving through dark passageways with its colony. At first glance, it seems like an unlikely biological celebrity. Yet scientists have spent decades studying these animals because they possess several unusual traits. Compared with many animals of similar size, naked mole rats can live surprisingly long lives. They also show a remarkable resistance to many of the age-related problems that affect other mammals. Of course, they are not truly immortal. Nothing living is. But they challenge many assumptions about aging. They remind us that the familiar patterns we observe in one species do not always apply everywhere else in nature. Evolution has produced many ways of living, many ways of growing older, and many ways of surviving. Some of the most dramatic examples can be found in one of the coldest environments on Earth. The waters surrounding Antarctica are so cold that many animals would struggle to survive there. Yet life thrives even in these icy seas. Among the inhabitants are Antarctic ice fish. These fish possess a remarkable adaptation that helps protect them from freezing. Their bodies produce special proteins that interfere with the formation of ice crystals. Rather than allowing ice to spread through their tissues, these proteins help keep their internal fluids flowing. It is an elegant solution to an enormous challenge. Imagine trying to keep a river moving during the coldest winter imaginable. Nature found a way, not through machinery, not through technology, but through millions of years of gradual adaptation. And while some species survive by preventing damage, others survive by repairing it. Consider the starfish. If a starfish loses one of its arms, it can often grow a new one. This ability alone would be impressive, yet some species can do far more. Under the right conditions, a portion of a starfish may regenerate into a nearly complete new individual. It is a process that seems almost unbelievable when viewed through human experience. For us, injuries often leave permanent marks. For the starfish, healing can involve rebuilding entire structures. The ocean is filled with such examples. Creatures that regenerate, creatures that glow, creatures that transform, creatures that thrive in darkness, pressure, heat, or cold. Taken together, these organisms reveal something important about life on Earth. There is no single, perfect design. Nature succeeds not because it finds one answer, but because it explores countless answers. Every species represents an experiment. Every adaptation tells a story. Some stories involve speed. Others involve camouflage. Others involve cooperation. And some involve extraordinary resilience. Over billions of years, evolution has behaved less like an architect following a strict plan, and more like a patient artist, constantly revising, adjusting, and discovering new possibilities. The result is a world filled with solutions that are often stranger, more creative, and more beautiful than anything we might invent ourselves. Yet survival is only part of the story. Living things do not merely endure their environments. They must also perceive them. A flower waiting for a pollinator, a bird crossing an ocean, a bat navigating through darkness. Each organism experiences a version of reality shaped by its own senses. And those sensory worlds can be every bit as astonishing as the creatures themselves. As we move deeper into the story of life, it becomes clear that survival is only part of nature's achievement. To survive, an organism must first understand its surroundings. It must find food, avoid danger, locate shelter, recognize companions, navigate through landscapes that are often complex, and constantly changing. Humans experience the world primarily through sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Because these senses feel so familiar, it is easy to assume that other creatures experience reality in roughly the same way. Yet the natural world tells a very different story. Every species lives inside its own sensory universe. The forest that surrounds a bird is not quite the same forest experienced by a deer. The ocean known by a whale is not the same ocean experienced by a fish. Even a flower may perceive aspects of its environment that remain invisible to us. One of the most fascinating examples can be found in the night sky. Imagine standing in a dark field after sunset. The moon is hidden behind clouds. The landscape is barely visible. For most humans, moving confidently through such darkness would be difficult. Yet overhead, bats emerge and begin hunting. They dart between trees, avoid obstacles, and capture tiny insects with extraordinary precision. At first glance, it might seem as though they possess exceptional night vision, but many bats rely on something even more remarkable. They create sound, very high-pitched sound. These calls travel outward, strike nearby objects, and bounce back as echoes. The returning echoes carry information about the world: distance, shape, movement, texture. By interpreting these echoes, bats construct a detailed picture of their surroundings. In a sense, they listen to the landscape. Imagine standing in a completely dark room and somehow being able to perceive walls, furniture, doorways, and moving objects through sound alone. That is closer to the experience of a bat. The darkness that limits human vision becomes a rich environment filled with information. And bats are not the only creatures that reveal hidden dimensions of reality. Certain snakes possess special organs capable of detecting heat. For these animals, the world is not simply a collection of shapes and colors. It is also a landscape of temperatures. A warm-blooded animal moving through cool vegetation may stand out like a glowing lantern against a darker background. Even in darkness, the snake can perceive patterns that remain invisible to human eyes. It is a reminder that reality contains far more information than any one species can detect. The world around us is larger than our senses. Far above forests, oceans, and mountain ranges, another extraordinary navigation system quietly guides millions of travelers. Bird migration has long inspired wonder. Every year, countless birds undertake journeys that span enormous distances. Some cross entire continents. Others travel across oceans. Many return to remarkably precise locations year after year. For centuries, people wondered how such navigation was possible. Today, scientists believe that many migratory birds can sense Earth's magnetic field, not in the way a person reads a map, not as visible lines stretching across the sky, but as subtle information helping them maintain direction during long journeys. Somewhere within their sensory systems exists a connection to one of the planet's invisible forces. It is almost poetic to imagine. While we look upward and see empty air, a migrating bird may be following patterns hidden within the world itself. The deeper we explore nature, the more we discover that even seemingly simple organisms possess surprising abilities. Consider a flower. At first glance, a flower appears passive, rooted in place, silent, motionless. Yet, modern research suggests that flowers may be far more responsive than they appear. In one study, scientists found evidence that certain flowers reacted to the vibrations produced by nearby pollinating insects. When bees approached, the flowers adjusted the sweetness of their nectar, not because they could think in the human sense, not because they possessed ears, but because evolution had shaped them to respond to specific patterns in their environment. The flower and the bee participate in an ancient conversation, a conversation conducted through vibration, scent, color, and reward. Neither partner fully controls it, yet both benefit from it. Such interactions remind us that communication in nature often takes forms very different from human language. And then there are the bees themselves, small, familiar, often overlooked, yet surprisingly capable. For many years, people assumed that sophisticated numerical understanding required a relatively large brain. Bees challenge that assumption. Experiments suggest that bees can distinguish between different quantities and even grasp simple relationships involving the concept of nothing. Not nothing in a philosophical sense. Rather, the understanding that an empty space contains fewer objects than a space containing one object. It may sound simple, but for a creature with such a tiny brain, it is a remarkable achievement. Nature repeatedly reminds us that intelligence and perception can emerge in unexpected places, sometimes in animals with large nervous systems, sometimes in creatures that seem almost impossibly small. What unites these examples is not their similarity, but their diversity. Evolution has explored countless ways of interacting with the world. Some organisms follow scent trails, others follow stars, others follow magnetic fields, some interpret echoes, some perceive heat, some respond to vibrations, and each approach reveals a different version of reality. Imagine gathering every sensory experience from every species on Earth and placing them side by side. The result would not be one world. It would be thousands of worlds overlapping in the same space. Invisible worlds, silent worlds, magnetic worlds, chemical worlds, worlds of sound and warmth and vibration, all existing around us at this very moment. The more we learn about these hidden dimensions, the more difficult it becomes to think of nature as simple. Life is not merely surviving, it is perceiving, interpreting, responding, and in some cases, solving problems in ways that seem astonishingly sophisticated. As evolution continued its long journey, certain creatures began developing abilities that looked increasingly like planning, memory, learning, and even forms of intelligence we once believed belonged almost exclusively to ourselves. When most people think about intelligence, they often imagine something familiar: a human solving a puzzle, a scientist making a discovery, a student learning a new skill. Intelligence can seem closely tied to language, technology, and the kinds of thinking that humans perform every day. But nature rarely follows our expectations. The deeper scientists explore the living world, the more they discover that intelligence is not confined to a single branch of life's family tree. Instead, it appears in many different forms, shaped by millions of years of adaptation. One of the most famous examples lies beneath the waves: the octopus. At first glance, an octopus seems almost otherworldly. Its body is soft and flexible. It can squeeze through openings that appear impossibly small. Its skin can rapidly change color and texture. Its movements often seem fluid and unpredictable, like water taking on a temporary shape. Yet perhaps the most remarkable feature of the octopus is its ability to solve problems. In laboratories and aquariums, octopuses have opened containers, escaped enclosures, manipulated objects, and learned through experience. Scientists continue to study how these animals process information because their intelligence evolved along a very different path from our own. The last common ancestor shared by humans and octopuses lived hundreds of millions of years ago. Since then, both lineages have traveled very different evolutionary roads. and yet each eventually arrived at sophisticated ways of interacting with the world. It is as though nature discovered multiple routes leading toward complex problem solving. Even more fascinating is the fact that octopuses possess an unusual ability to adjust some of the biological instructions inside their cells as environmental conditions change. You can think of it as a kind of fine-tuning system, allowing them to remain flexible in changing environments. Rather than being locked into a single set of responses, they can make subtle adjustments as conditions shift around them. It is another reminder that life often succeeds through adaptability. Far from the oceans, another form of intelligence echoes through rivers and coastal waters around the world. The intelligence of dolphins. For centuries, people have been fascinated by dolphins because of their playful behavior and apparent curiosity. Modern research has revealed something especially intriguing. Many dolphins produce unique signature whistles that function almost like names. Each whistle carries information about individual identity. Dolphins can recognize these distinctive calls and respond to them, even after long periods of separation. Imagine standing in a crowded gathering and instantly recognizing the voice of a close friend. That ability feels familiar to us. Yet dolphins appear to possess something surprisingly similar within their own social lives. These underwater communities are rich with relationships, communication, and cooperation. The ocean, often perceived as silent from above, is actually filled with conversations. Some carried by clicks, some by whistles, some by sounds traveling through water across great distances. Elsewhere, among forests and fields, another surprising mind watches quietly from the branches. The crow. For many years, birds were underestimated. Their small brains led many people to assume that their mental abilities must also be limited. Yet crows repeatedly challenge that assumption. Experiments have shown that they can use tools, solve complex tasks, and remember important information. Some species even appear capable of planning for future needs. Imagine packing supplies today for a trip you will take tomorrow. That ability requires more than simple reaction. It requires anticipating a future situation. And somehow, these black-feathered birds have evolved forms of thinking that allow them to do exactly that. Nature continues to reveal intelligence in places where we least expect it. Sometimes, intelligence appears not through clever problem-solving, but through deep social bonds. Elephants provide a powerful example. Elephants are known for their remarkable memories. They can remember migration routes, watering holes, and social relationships across many years. But perhaps even more moving are observations suggesting that elephants may experience forms of grief. Researchers have documented elephants lingering near the remains of deceased companions, gently touching bones with their trunks and displaying behaviors that suggest recognition and remembrance. Of course, we must be careful not to assume that elephant emotions are identical to human emotions. Yet these observations hint at something profound. The capacity for strong social connection may not belong exclusively to our species. It may be part of a much larger story unfolding across the animal kingdom. The question of self-awareness leads to another fascinating area of research: mirror self-recognition. If an animal sees its reflection, does it understand that it is looking at itself? For many species, the answer appears to be no. The reflection is treated as another individual. But a small number of animals have shown evidence suggesting a different understanding. Among them are dolphins and elephants. This ability does not necessarily mean that these animals think exactly as humans do. Rather, it suggests that awareness of oneself may emerge in multiple forms throughout nature. And then, just when we begin to feel comfortable with our definitions of intelligence, life presents us with something even stranger: the slime mold. A slime mold has no brain, no nervous system, no thoughts in the way humans understand them. Yet when scientists place slime molds in carefully designed environments, they often solve problems. Surprisingly well, they can navigate mazes, they can identify efficient routes between resources, they can adapt their growth patterns based on changing conditions. Watching a slime mold spread across a surface can feel strangely unsettling at first. It resembles neither plant nor animal, yet beneath that unfamiliar appearance lies an important lesson. Problem solving does not always require a brain. Nature sometimes arrives at effective solutions through entirely different mechanisms. And perhaps that is one of the most beautiful insights hidden within the living world. Intelligence is not a single thing. It is not a ladder with humans standing at the top. Instead, it resembles a vast landscape filled with many different strategies. The octopus solving a puzzle, the dolphin calling a companion, the crow preparing for tomorrow, the elephant remembering, the slime mold finding a path. Each represents a unique answer to the challenges of life. And while intelligence often captures our attention, an even greater force has shaped the history of Earth. Not competition alone, not individual brilliance, but cooperation. Again and again, life has discovered that survival becomes easier when organisms work together, forming partnerships so deep that entire ecosystems depend upon them. If survival reveals the creativity of life, cooperation reveals its wisdom. When people first learn about evolution, they are often introduced to ideas of competition. Animals competing for food, plants competing for sunlight, predators pursuing prey. These interactions are certainly part of nature's story, but they are only part of it. The longer scientists study living systems, the more they discover that cooperation is woven deeply into the fabric of life. Again and again, organisms form partnerships, sometimes temporary, sometimes lasting millions of years, sometimes so successful that neither partner can survive without the other. One of the simplest and most beautiful examples can be found on a quiet rock, an old fence post, or the bark of a tree. At first glance, a lichen may look unremarkable, a patch of pale green, a splash of gray, something easily overlooked during a walk through nature. Yet a lichen is not a single organism. It is a partnership, a fungus living together with microscopic algae or bacteria. Each contributes something valuable. One partner helps provide structure and protection. The other helps produce food using sunlight. Together, they create something neither could achieve alone. It is a lesson repeated throughout nature. Life often succeeds not by standing apart, but by joining forces. This pattern becomes even more remarkable beneath the soil of forests. Imagine walking through a woodland after gentle rain. The trees seem separate. Each trunk stands alone. Each crown reaches toward the sky. Yet beneath your feet lies a hidden world. A network of fungal threads stretches through the soil, connecting roots across surprising distances. Scientists sometimes describe this as an underground network, linking trees and fungi. The image is not perfect, but it captures something important. These fungal networks can transport nutrients, water, and chemical signals through the forest floor. Young seedlings growing in deep shade may receive support through these connections. Resources can move from one area to another. Information can travel through the living system. From above, a forest appears to be a collection of individual trees. From below, it begins to resemble a community, a conversation unfolding beneath the ground. The forest is not silent after all. It is simply speaking in a language that humans rarely notice, and forests have other ways of communicating as well. When certain plants are damaged by insects, they may release chemical signals into the air. Nearby plants can detect these signals and begin strengthening their own defenses before the insects arrive. It is not communication in the human sense. No words are exchanged. No conscious warning is given. Yet information still moves through the ecosystem. One organism influences another. A message travels. A response follows. The result is a subtle form of cooperation that has evolved over immense spans of time. The more closely we examine nature, the more interconnected everything becomes. Even plants sometimes challenge our assumptions in surprising ways. Many people imagine plants as passive organisms, rooted in place, dependent entirely on sunlight, water, and soil. For most plants, that picture is largely accurate. Yet, evolution occasionally explores unexpected paths. Consider the Venus flytrap. Growing in nutrient-poor environments, it faces a challenge. The soil contains limited resources. To compensate, it developed an unusual strategy. Its leaves form traps capable of capturing insects. Tiny sensory hairs detect movement. Only after multiple touches occur within a short period does the trap close. This helps prevent wasted effort caused by falling debris or raindrops. The plant is not thinking. It is not making decisions as animals do. Yet through evolution, it has acquired a remarkably effective way of responding to its environment. The result feels almost animal-like, despite remaining entirely plant-based. Nature rarely respects the categories humans create. Many of the most successful partnerships exist beneath the ocean's surface. Coral reefs provide one of the finest examples. When viewed from above, a coral reef can resemble an underwater city. Colorful, busy, filled with life. Fish move through intricate structures. Countless species find shelter among its branches. Yet the foundation of this vast ecosystem begins with tiny coral animals and microscopic algae living together. The algae help provide energy. The coral provides protection and access to sunlight. Together, they construct some of the most biologically rich environments on Earth. A partnership between small organisms eventually supports entire communities. It is a powerful reminder that enormous outcomes often emerge from simple relationships, and perhaps nowhere is cooperation more personal than within our own bodies. Many people think of themselves as individual organisms. In one sense, that is true, but the reality is more complicated. Your body is home to vast communities of microscopic life. Trillions of bacteria, along with other microorganisms, live on your skin, in your digestive system, and throughout your body. Most of them are not invaders. They are partners. They help digest food. They influence immune function. They participate in processes that support health and balance. In many ways, a human being resembles an ecosystem as much as an individual organism. You are not alone, even within your own body. This idea can feel surprising at first, yet it reflects a broader truth about life on Earth. No organism exists entirely in isolation. Trees depend on fungi, flowers depend on pollinators, corals depend on algae, animals depend on microbes. Entire ecosystems emerge from relationships. If we could step back and view the living world from a great distance, we might notice something remarkable. Nature is not simply a collection of separate species sharing the same planet. It is a network of partnerships, a web of exchanges, an ongoing process of cooperation unfolding across forests, oceans, grasslands, rivers, and even within ourselves. And as these partnerships grow larger and more complex, they begin to shape entire landscapes. Forests influence rainfall. Tiny organisms build reefs visible from space. Predators alter rivers. Earthworms transform soil. The connections become so extensive that the planet itself starts to resemble a living network. By now, a pattern has begun to emerge. Again and again, life reveals itself not as a collection of isolated organisms, but as a network of relationships. A tree influences the soil influences the roots influence fungi, the fungi influence neighboring plants. One connection leads to another and another, until individual stories merge into something much larger. An ecosystem. When we hear the word ecosystem, it may sound technical or scientific, yet the idea itself is surprisingly simple. An ecosystem is a community of living things interacting with one another and with their surroundings. The forest is not separate from the rain. The river is not separate from the fish. The grassland is not separate from the insects. Everything participates, everything contributes. And some of the most extraordinary ecosystems on Earth are built by creatures so small that they can easily be overlooked. Consider a coral reef. From above, a reef may appear like an underwater garden filled with brilliant colors and endless activity. Fish weave through intricate structures. Sea turtles glide past. Countless species find shelter among its twisting forms. Yet the architects responsible for building these underwater worlds are tiny coral polyps. Each polyp is a small animal, delicate and unassuming. Working together over many generations, these tiny creatures slowly construct vast limestone structures beneath the sea. Year after year, century after century, millennium after millennium, layer upon layer accumulates. Eventually, entire underwater cities emerge. Cities built not from concrete or steel, but from countless small lives working together. Standing before a great coral reef is a little like standing before a cathedral built one stone at a time over hundreds of years. The scale feels almost impossible when compared with the size of the builders. And coral reefs are far from the only examples of small organisms shaping the world. Beneath many forests and gardens live another group of quiet engineers, earthworms. Most people encounter earthworms during rainy days or while digging in soil. They rarely attract much attention, yet their influence is enormous. As earthworms move through the ground, they create channels that allow air and water to penetrate deeper into the soil. They help break down organic material. They recycle nutrients. They improve conditions for plant growth. In a sense, earthworms help maintain the foundation upon which entire ecosystems depend. Charles Darwin himself spent years studying earthworms and became fascinated by their importance. The lesson is a recurring one. The natural world is often sustained by organisms that remain almost invisible. Not every hero of Earth's story is large. Not every important creature has feathers, fur, or scales. Some of the most important work happens quietly beneath our feet. Elsewhere, another group of small organisms help support life on a planetary scale. Pollinators, bees, butterflies, moths, birds, bats. As they move from flower to flower, they transport pollen, allowing plants to reproduce. Without these interactions, many flowering plants would struggle to survive. And because flowering plants support countless food webs, the effects ripple outward through ecosystems. A single bee visiting a flower may seem insignificant, yet multiplied millions of times across landscapes and seasons, these visits help sustain entire living communities. Nature often operates through countless small actions, accumulating into something immense. The same principle appears in one of the most famous ecosystems on Earth, the Amazon rainforest. From satellite images, the Amazon appears as a vast green ocean stretching across South America. It contains extraordinary biodiversity, with countless species of plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms. But one of its most fascinating qualities is the relationship it maintains with water. Trees draw moisture from the soil. That moisture eventually returns to the atmosphere through tiny openings in leaves. As enormous numbers of trees participate in this process, vast quantities of water vapor enter the air. Clouds form. Rain falls. The forest helps generate conditions that support the forest itself. It is a remarkable feedback loop, a living system participating in the creation of its own environment. The deeper we look, the more nature resembles a conversation. Actions create responses. Responses create new actions. The story continues. One of the most famous examples of ecological interconnectedness comes from the return of wolves to a national park in North America. For many years, wolves had been absent from the region. Without them, populations of grazing animals increased. Those animals fed heavily on young vegetation near rivers and streams. Over time, changes spread throughout the ecosystem. Then wolves returned. Their presence altered the behavior and numbers of grazing animals. Vegetation began recovering in some areas. Shrubs and trees increased. Other species benefited. Even riverbanks became more stable as plant roots helped hold soil in place. The influence of wolves extended far beyond direct interactions with prey. It spread through the ecosystem like ripples moving across a pond. Scientists refer to such effects as trophic cascades. But perhaps the simplest way to think about them is this. When one piece of nature changes, many other pieces often change as well. The web is connected. A thread pulled in one corner may be felt elsewhere. This interconnectedness extends across the entire planet. Consider a single carbon atom. Long ago, it may have been floating in the atmosphere. Later, it may have become part of a leaf. An animal may have eaten that leaf. The carbon may have moved into muscle, soil, ocean water, or another living organism. Over time, it could travel through forests, rivers, oceans, and the air itself. Life is constantly recycling materials. Nothing remains in one place forever. The same atoms move through countless stories: a tree, a bird, a fish, a flower, a human. The boundaries between living things begin to feel less rigid when viewed across enough time. And perhaps that is one of the deepest lessons ecosystems offer. The world is not composed of separate parts assembled side by side. It is composed of relationships. Every organism influences something else. Every species participates in a larger pattern. Some contributions are obvious, others are nearly invisible, yet all help shape the living earth. And when we widen our perspective even further, looking not just across landscapes, but across thousands, millions, and even billions of years, another extraordinary truth comes into view. Life has been transforming this planet for an astonishing length of time. When we look at nature, it is easy to focus on the present moment. The tree outside a window, the bird crossing the sky, the flower opening in a garden. Everything feels immediate, as though the living world exists only in the brief span of our own lives. Yet Earth remembers much longer stories. Stories written not in years or centuries, but in thousands, millions, and billions of years. To understand life fully, we must occasionally slow down and look through the lens of deep time. Imagine standing beside a very old tree. Not merely a tree that has witnessed a few generations of people, but one that has stood through entire chapters of human history. Some ancient bristlecone pines growing in the mountains of North America have lived for thousands of years. Long before modern cities existed, these trees were already reaching toward the sky. They endured storms, droughts, cold winters, changing civilizations. While human history rushed forward, these trees continued their quiet work, growing a little each year, adding one thin ring at a time. There is something calming about such longevity, a reminder that life does not always move at the pace of human concerns. Some organisms measure time differently, and some stretch our understanding of individuality itself. One of the most remarkable examples is known as Pando. At first glance, Pando appears to be a forest of many trees. Thousands of trunks rise from the ground. Leaves shimmer in the wind. Birds move among the branches. Everything seems ordinary. Yet beneath the surface lies a surprising reality. These trees are connected by a shared root system. In many ways, they are not thousands of separate individuals. They are parts of one enormous living organism, a single organism spread across a large landscape, a forest that is also, in a sense, one living being. Nature often blurs the boundaries we assume are fixed. Where does one tree end and another begin? Sometimes the answer is less obvious than it seems. The deeper we travel into Earth's past, the more dramatic the changes become. Consider the Sahara Desert. Today, it is one of the largest deserts on Earth. Vast expanses of sand stretch toward distant horizons. Temperatures can be extreme. Water is scarce. Yet thousands of years ago, parts of the Sahara looked very different. There were lakes, grasslands, rivers, animals that would seem entirely out of place in the modern desert. The landscape supported a rich variety of life. Over time, shifts in climate transformed the region. The Green Sahara gradually became the desert we know today. This transformation reminds us that Earth's environments are not permanent. Even the most familiar landscapes are chapters in an ongoing story. Mountains rise and erode, forests expand and retreat, oceans advance and withdraw, climate changes, life adapts. The world is always becoming something new. Perhaps nowhere is this more evident than during Earth's great extinction events. The phrase extinction event can sound dramatic, and indeed these periods were profound turning points in the history of life. Several times, enormous numbers of species disappeared within relatively short geological periods. The causes varied: volcanic eruptions, climate shifts, asteroid impacts, environmental upheaval. Entire ecosystems were transformed. If we had witnessed these moments firsthand, we might have concluded that life had reached a dead end. Yet, something remarkable happened. Life continued, not unchanged, not unaffected, but continued. New species emerged, new ecosystems formed, new evolutionary experiments began. Imagine a forest after a powerful storm. Some trees may fall. Openings appear in the canopy. Sunlight reaches the ground. Seeds begin to grow. The forest that eventually emerges may differ from the one that came before, but life persists. Earth has repeated this process again and again across immense stretches of time. Destruction has often been followed by renewal. Loss has often been followed by innovation. Resilience is one of the defining qualities of life. Even some of nature's most misunderstood entities have played surprising roles in this long history. Consider viruses. Today, viruses are often associated with illness, which makes it easy to view them only through that lens. Yet their relationship with life is far more complex. Over evolutionary time, viruses have influenced the development of countless organisms. Fragments of ancient viral material have become woven into the genetic histories of many species, including humans. Some of these ancient genetic contributions eventually took on useful functions. What began as an interaction long ago became part of the ongoing story of life itself. It is another reminder that nature rarely divides the world into simple categories of good and bad. Relationships are often more complicated, more nuanced, more surprising. As we step back and look across deep time, a remarkable pattern emerges. Life is not static. It is not a finished product. It is a process, a continuous unfolding. Species appear and disappear. Landscapes transform. Oceans change. Continents drift. Yet through all these transformations, life persists, not because it remains unchanged, but because it changes. Adaptability is one of its greatest strengths. The tree bending in the wind survives where a rigid structure might break. The species capable of adjusting to new conditions often endures where others cannot. For billions of years, Earth has served as both stage and participant in this story. The planet changes life. Life changes the planet. Together, they evolve through time. And eventually, after countless generations, after ancient oceans and vanished deserts, after forests, reefs, extinctions, recoveries, and endless adaptation, a species emerged capable of reflecting on this entire journey. A species capable of looking back through deep time and asking questions about its own place within the living world. That species is us. After traveling through ancient oceans, hidden forests, coral reefs, deserts, fungal networks, and the deep history of life itself, we arrive at a familiar destination: ourselves. At first, humans can seem separate from the rest of nature. We build cities, we create technology, we travel across oceans and through the skies. We reshape landscapes and alter environments. It can sometimes feel as though humanity exists outside the natural world rather than within it. Yet the deeper we look, the more that illusion begins to fade. The truth is that humans are woven into the same vast story as every other living thing on Earth. In fact, even the human body is far less solitary than it first appears. Imagine shrinking down until you could explore your own body as though it were a landscape. You might discover that you are not alone. Your skin, digestive system, and countless other surfaces are home to vast communities of microscopic organisms, bacteria, fungi, other tiny forms of life. Together they form what scientists call the microbiome. But rather than focusing on terminology, it may be easier to picture a bustling city. A city filled with countless residents carrying out different jobs. Some help process food. Some help maintain balance. Some interact with the body's defenses. Most go unnoticed, quietly performing tasks that support the larger system. For much of human history, people had no idea these invisible communities existed. Yet they have been with us all along. The boundary between us and the rest of life becomes less clear the closer we look. The same pattern appears inside the human brain. Among all the wonders of nature, the brain remains one of the most extraordinary. Within the space inside your head exists a network of astonishing complexity. Billions of nerve cells communicate through countless connections. Tiny electrical signals travel through these networks. Every moment, memories form, thoughts emerge, dreams unfold, ideas connect. As you listen to these words, countless messages move through your brain, creating the experience of awareness itself. And yet, despite all our scientific progress, much about consciousness remains mysterious. How does a collection of cells become an experience? How does matter become thought? Scientists continue exploring these questions, and many answers remain incomplete. There is something comforting about that. Even after centuries of discovery, nature still holds mysteries. The story is not finished, and perhaps it never will be. The human brain may feel unique, yet it emerged through the same evolutionary processes that shaped every other living organism. The same forces that produced forests, whales, octopuses, hummingbirds, fungi, and coral reefs eventually produced us. We are not separate from the tree of life. We are one branch among many. A very recent branch, in fact. If Earth's entire history were compressed into a single year, human civilization would appear only in the final moments before midnight on the last day. The vast majority of life's story unfolded long before our arrival, and even today, much of the planet's most important work continues without us. Far out in the oceans, for example, tiny drifting organisms quietly help sustain life on a global scale. Most people rarely think about phytoplankton. They are microscopic organisms suspended in sunlit waters, invisible to the naked eye unless gathered in enormous numbers. Yet these tiny organisms help produce a significant portion of the oxygen present in Earth's atmosphere. Every breath we take carries a connection to distant oceans, to sunlight falling across waves, to microscopic life drifting near the surface of the sea. Once again, we encounter the same lesson. The world is connected in ways that are easy to overlook. The food we eat depends on soil, water, pollinators, microorganisms, and stable ecosystems. The air we breathe depends on forests and oceans. Fresh water depends on rainfall, rivers, wetlands, and natural cycles that have operated for millions of years. Even the most advanced city ultimately depends on processes rooted in the natural world. We remain participants in the same web that supports every other species. And perhaps the most beautiful connection of all reaches beyond Earth itself. The atoms that compose your body have an ancient history. Long before Earth existed, long before the sun formed, the universe was a very different place. The earliest stars were born. Inside those stars, new elements gradually formed. When some stars eventually reached the ends of their lives, they released those elements into space. Over immense spans of time, that material became part of new stars, new planets, and eventually living organisms. The calcium in your bones, the iron carried through your blood, the carbon that forms much of your body, all have origins that stretch back to ancient stars. In a very real sense, every person is connected not only to life on Earth, but also to the larger history of the cosmos. The same universe that created galaxies also produced forests. The same physical laws that shaped distant stars eventually helped create coral reefs, hummingbirds, oak trees, and human minds capable of wondering about their origins. The story becomes both larger and more intimate at the same time. You are connected to the oceans, connected to forests, connected to microbes, connected to ancient ancestors stretching back billions of years, connected to creatures living today, connected to stars that vanished long before Earth was born. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson hidden within the living world. The greatest wonder is not any single species, not the immortal jellyfish, not the tardigrade, not the whale, the elephant, the octopus, or the ancient tree. The greatest wonder is the web itself, a vast network of relationships stretching across time and space. A story without a single main character, a story in which every living thing plays a part. As our journey gently comes to an end, imagine Earth once more from far away, a blue world drifting through darkness. clouds turning slowly above oceans, forests breathing, rivers flowing, whales singing beneath the waves, trees sharing resources through hidden networks, tiny organisms producing oxygen in distant seas, countless forms of life participating in an ancient conversation that began billions of years ago and continues even now. And somewhere on that small blue world, a person listening quietly, perhaps resting comfortably, perhaps already drifting toward sleep, is part of that story too, not separate from it, not standing outside it, but woven into it, just as every living thing has always been. So tonight, as the world continues its slow turning beneath the stars, you might carry with you a simple thought. Life is extraordinary not because it exists in isolated wonders, but because every wonder is connected to another. A forest to a fungus, a flower to a bee, an ocean to a breath, a star to a human being. And all of it, together, forms the living earth. Thank you for sharing this journey. May the quiet beauty of our planet stay with you as your thoughts begin to slow. Your mind grows peaceful, and the long story of life continues beneath the same sky that has sheltered every generation before us. Good night, and rest well.